Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Not Funny Guys Present Go Team Venture. We are rolling right along here with Season 4. If you're not already, like, subscribe, comment, share, all those fun things helps us get out there more. Just a quick note, the podcast, Not Funny Guys Off the Reels, is back up. We'll be hitting into some Edgar Wright material quite soon, so stay tuned. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, you should check that out as well. But we're venturing on here, to say the least, with the Venture Brothers in Season 4. We're in Part 1, so we're still in 2009. We're going to start off today with Episode 5, The Revenge Society. And this originally aired on November 15th, 2009, written by one of the co-creators, Doc Hammer. In fact, all these episodes are pretty much, with a few exceptions, written by the two co-creators, Jackson Public and Doc Hammer. But I do like to let you know. And so for this episode, we find ourselves in the midst of Phantom Limb's return. He returns, and he is half-baked crazy, to say the least. So we have him, besides being cuckoo, he is... he breaks into basically the guild headquarters while the council is interrogating and like putting on trial Intangible Fancy, who's like a ghost vapor thing. In the process, he kidnaps Councilman 8 and Councilman 3 after making them visible so we no longer see their silhouettes. And this is Dragoon and Red Mantle, members of the Council of 13. And Phantom Limb is calling himself Revenge. We then cut to him basically hiding out what looks like an old abandoned mansion. He has kidnapped Billy, who he does have a history with, and he has, after attacking and subduing them, apparently, I guess, Dragoon's body was dying, and so he has Billy stitch Dragoon's head onto Red Mantle's body. Still calling himself Revenge. He's very paranoid. He's missing one arm, and he's missing both arms, actually, but he's got like a robotic one. It's very weird. I don't know if he's actually missing the other one. It may just be invisible, but it's like very strange. He's obviously took damage at the Battle of Cremation Creek. We then find ourselves with Watch and Ward going to the Sovereign, aka David Bowie, and prizing him of the situation. Apparently, not only did he kidnap them, but he broke into the vault, the chamber sub rosa, and stole the charter, which turns out to be the guild charter about who is the rightful heir, and Revenge / Phantom Limb believes it's him. Now, he does apparently chose to kidnap Dragoon and Red Mantle because they are the oldest member of the guild. They were recruited by Phantom Limb's grandfather, Phantomos, who we saw way back in the Orb episode, apparently in 1959. Interesting, and Millie, of course, mishears them because he's been put back in a bag. But strangely enough, when we cut to seeing them, it's literally Buddy Holly and Big Bopper. From the day the music died by Don McLean. Yeah, they're not dead, apparently. Apparently they were recruited into a crappy band where Phantomos played the sousaphone. But apparently he's talking about how the guild was formed as a sacred order of knights to protect the orb. And then at this point, Billy spills the beans that he actually knows where it is. If we remember in Orb in Season 3, it's in the safe in the Venture Brothers compound. We then cut back. Now we cut to the Venture compound. We find Sergeant Hadrid losing it because he's convinced that Hank hates him. And then all of a sudden the guild shows up at the compound in like full force. Sovereign has brought them all there. We then find Dragoon and Red Mantle trying to figure out how much body they have control over at one point. And then we have Phantom Limb, before going to the compound, introduces them to the rest of the Revenge Society, which is Wisdom, which happens to be a mug, Chuck, who's a toaster, and Lady Nightshade, which is a woman's shoe, which we do cut to eventually finding out that it is one of the shoes. It did belong to Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch. And while they're being introduced, Billy says, "Why can't I hear them?" And Red Mantle declares, "Because you are sane." Oh gosh, that makes me laugh every time. And of course, Phantom Limb wants to destroy the guild or take over, basically. And then while the guild is at the compound, Hatred and Hank are hiding out in like the control room with all the cameras. And at some point, Hatred thinks they're there for him, and he gives Hank the worst birds in the bee speech. It's basically like Hank basically says, I know you're a pedophile. So Hank wants to go all Batman on them, messing with them with the doorbell. Well, apparently Dr. Venture and Rusty and Dean were hiding out in the panic room, and Rusty ends up telling this story about how the Action Man would wake him up in the middle of the night with a gun to his head and click, click, not today, Rusty, not today. Dean says they should find out what the guild wants. Phantom Limb, of course, wants the orb. That's why he's trying to break in. Hank and Hatred are somewhere in the underground tunnels, according to Hank's plan, which is apparently to run away until Hank decides that the more Batman thing to do is to face the situation. Red Mantle and Dragoon are sent with Billy. They get the orb and they drop. Of course, they drop Billy in the sack and knock him out, sorry. They actually even take out a guild blackout soldier in the process. Phantom Limb argues with Wisdom while they're spying the compound. Again, he's arguing with a mug. Rusty then opines about the advantages and disadvantages of fighting bad guys to Dean while they are hiding out on the moving tramway in the building, trying to look like a pile of clothes. And then eventually they reach the end of it, and David Bowie finds them, aka the Sovereign, tells them to come with him. Hank and Hatred find the bag. They find Billy. While there's a big ceremony going outside, Phantom Limb claims to be the rightful sovereign by birthright of being Phantomos, and basically he is corrected that apparently Lloyd Venture is the true one, and therefore Dean Venture is the heir. Dean is therefore the sovereign, and then he knights David Bowie, making him the sovereign. Phantom Limb then tries to activate the orb, only for us to cut back in time to what we saw with Lloyd Venture and Sandow in the past, where apparently we thought Sandow killed him. Apparently Sandow broke the orb, and then reveals to Dr. Venture, Lloyd Venture, that Colonel Venture, that his original orders were to kill him. He's like, oh, well, never mind. They arrest Phantom Limb and all that fun stuff. And then, unfortunately, because Billy is an adult who looks like a child, with the most inappropriate aftershots, he wakes up in bed thinking it's his bed, only to find out it's Hatred's. And ew. So, all right. So that brings us to the end of that episode. On to self-medication. All right, so we're moving right along here. We're on Self-Medication, originally aired November 22nd, 2009. This one's written by Jackson Public. Now, in this one, we find out that apparently the Guild has a new clause allowing for mental health treatment to be something that calls off arching. And it opens with the whole Venture compound under attack, the Monarch chasing down Dr. Venture on the roof. But it's Wednesday night, plans have to be canceled because of that new guild clause, which Monarch will then try to circumvent. But everyone basically packs up, and we'll try this again later. And 21, who is in the middle of a headlock with Hatred, says, I owe you one. We then cut to Rusty in the past when he was younger, talking to his dad, Therapy, who isn't even in the room. He left and then sneaks back in at the end. Real abusive stuff. We then cut to Rusty in the present, telling his new group, his little, therapy group, that this is why he was hesitant to get back into therapy, because basically previously it was his father who was awful at it. And then we kind of go around and meet the group, which is a bunch of former quote-unquote boy adventurers, boy detectives. We meet a former Wonder Boy who now has an eating disorder. We meet Lance Hale and his brother Dale Hale. They're basically analogs for the Hardy Boys. Interestingly enough, they supposedly never saw the murder of their father, which has very much Menendez Brothers kind of vibes to it, needless to say. Of course, an old familiar Action Johnny is there, only because he's court-ordered. And then Robo Boy, who apparently has a reset button down where most people have their private parts. We then find that Hatred has taken Hank and Dean to see a movie. A lot of kids there. It's kind of implied that it's kind of like a Lord of the Rings movie. And then the row in front of them gets populated by 21 and a bunch of henchmen. And they're all getting into little nasty back and forths with each other. And Hatred is freaking out because for some reason he may or may not be running out of his medication that suppresses these urges towards inappropriate things with children. And he starts having like a full-on panic attack and runs out of the theater eventually. Cut back to the therapy group. We find Johnny telling about his drug habit. It's all started in his dad's lab. Rusty couldn't wear pants until he went to college, because if you ever look at the old Rusty Venture cartoons, he's always in shorts. Lance and Dale basically confessing to their father's murder, unofficially. Robo Boy has anger about giant robots, and Wonder Boy talking about how he can't get an erection without being tied to a chair with a bomb strapped to his chest. And apparently, they then go through some puppet therapy, and Johnny sort of admits the whole idea that the puppet's name is, chemical addiction. And he hugs it at the end. And Rusty is so glad they never get to his, because apparently his was premature ejaculation. The therapist has some sort of attack. It looks like he's poisoned. He falls over. He's dead. And a snake slithers out of his pants. Everybody gets all crazy. Apparently the tea had snake pheromones in it. Johnny is trying to sort of quote unquote steal prescription pads when they're find the files, because now they think they have a mystery to solve. Dale finds a clue, which is a matchbook to a strip club. The clue, they go there to investigate. We then find, we even hear talk about, apparently at the strip club, there's apparently a henchman recovery group meets there. Action Johnny even gets into a fight. Very Batman style. There's a lot of hitting and then pow, that kind of stuff. Apparently we find out the Hatred went full on running home, left the boys a bunch of messages. He's out of his P-file meds. The boys get a ride home with 21 and the henchmen, which is hilarious too. The boy group, Venture group, ends up at Dr. Z's house. Former Action Johnny rival nemesis. He thinks he's the culprit. It's not him. They invites him in for food, and he's gotten married and all this fun stuff. Little boy Robo Boy wants to be adopted by him. Hatred, of course, in the panic room. Hank and Dean try to talk to him. Wants to run away to Thailand and find himself a boy girl, where apparently Gary Glitter told him where to find them. If you get that reference, you're too old. But you're old enough to be me. Dr. Z basically feeds them, tells them to grow up, that everything's not always a mystery. Gives them some nonsense, give up all this nonsense. That's where Robo Boy wants Dr. Z to adopt him. Rusty realizes he's better than all these guys in the group and just leaves. He's like, my life's not even that messed up. Hank and Dean apparently lure Hatred out of the panic room, with Hank dressing up as Princess Tiny Feet, ex-wife of Hatred. The henchmen then dart Hatred and they net him. And apparently 21 was like, got you back. Reference to earlier. After all this, we do find 21 talking to 24's skull about the film. The Monarch walks by in his robe. Apparently 21 did drop off the snake at the therapist's office. So the whole mystery gets solved at the end. And this means that they can now go after Venture, return to the arching. So it all kind of comes full circle at the end. So, great episode, fun one. Lots of little inside references, the Hardy Boys, the Menendez brothers, all that stuff. Always fun, as usual. This one is just sort of, doesn't necessarily move any plot along, anything like that. If I look back at both these episodes, I would say that the Revenge Society definitely moves the plot and the story along a little bit more. We have some further developments with the past, in the present, all that fun stuff. Self-Medication is more like a bottle, kind of more like a bottle episode, where everything is kind of self-reflective, self-contained a little bit. Maybe not a true bottle episode, but everything's far more sort of self-contained. But we do meet some sort of bit characters around the side. We see returning ones like Action Johnny and Dr. Z. We'll never see Lance, Dale, this other Wonder Boy, or Robo Boy really ever again, but it is funny to throw them in there for reference points anyway. All right, so that brings us to the end of these episodes. So we will be turning our attention to episodes 7 and 8, which will wrap up part 1, but we'll keep going, don't worry. And we will be looking at The Better Man and Pinstripes and Poltergeists come Friday. So until then, do what you need to do. Like, subscribe, follow along, check out all of our other things from the Not Funny Guys. Contact us, write us, all that fun stuff. And I will see you guys on Friday. Go Team Venture. Say not funny guys again.
Not funny guys again.
No, can you say not funny guys?